Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for Imereti Agro Zone Greenhouse Cluster Development Invitation for Expression of Interest Industry Briefings. Before we'll start the meeting, I will shortly go over the netiquette. First of all, please submit your questions using the chat function addressed to all participants, which you can find at the bottom of your screen, or raise your hand and our panelists will try to answer as many questions as possible. In order to raise your hand, you will also need to go at the bottom of your screen and choose the button participants, after which in the participants tab, you will find at the bottom right corner an option to raise hand. Please virtually lower your hand in case you no longer have questions or don't want to comment. We are pleased to announce that the meeting will be interpreted into 2 languages. However, due to Zoom technical restrictions, the language channels will have the following allocations: English, and Georgian French, which basically means that if you want to listen to the meeting in English, you have to choose the English channel. And if you want to listen to the meeting in Georgian, you have to choose the French channel. Please speak slowly and clearly during the Q&A session for translation purposes. Thank you for your understanding. We hope you find the industry briefings informative, engaging, and insightful. Also, please note that this Zoom session will be recorded and shared via the IAZ UI website. For technical support, please either use the Zoom chat function or call the number indicated below. Thank you. And now I will pass the word to the director of IAZ, Mr. Archil Bukia.
Let me greet you all, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, first of all, for finding time and joining our last sector briefing. As I told you, this is the 4th sector briefing. We have had 3, and they were dedicated to the training and demo center, farmer greenhouse investors, and for ancillary businesses. Now, this one is for overall business management and maintenance. This is intended for businesses that may get interested in the operation and management of businesses in IAZ and investments in within the IAZ. Let me briefly tell you that this information is readily accessible and available on our website, but topics need to be raised, discussed further, and asked in the Q&A session. Next slide, please. Our panel participants are these ladies and gentlemen. I won't concentrate your attention on this any further. Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture, our management, and of course our consultants, consultancy firm representatives, a joint kind of effort of Dutch and Georgian consultancy firms, a consortium that will be presenting these slides and answering your questions. Next slide. Well, IAZ has been established with sound is disconnecting, but it was established in 2017 to carry out this initiative. 100% investor in the project initiative is the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture of Georgia through the Rural Development Agency. RDA is one of the subsidiaries of MEPA, and let me list several of the projects that it implements: chip credit, agro credit, agro insurance projects, processing, co-financing processing businesses, Plant Your Future, and other project initiatives that are implemented by the RDA. As I mentioned, the RDA is the 100% owner of IAZ. IAZ has 220 hectares of land, and we intend to have this greenhouse cluster developed at that land parcel. And the project aims to have the main infrastructure created at IAZ and services that will be delivered by IAZ to businesses that will be represented there. I will elaborate on that later on the following slides. Next to this one, please. We covered that as well. Now, the project to be successful and actively engaged and have great support and engagement of government agencies, there was a steering committee established. Chairman of the steering committee is the first Deputy Minister of Agriculture and Environmental Protection, Georgi Hanishvili, and the steering committee includes Deputy Ministers of Finance, Georgi Kakaridze, Infrastructure and Regional Development, Zia Georgobiani, of Justice, sound is bad, Akaki Sarishvili, of Economy, Falabishvili, Produce in Georgia, Minister of Agriculture again, RDA, head and deputy head, sound is bad, and ES management and consultancy firms. This kind of high representation of the steering committee indicates that the government grants high priority and importance to this project, and the ES has expression of interest, which is cleared with the steering committee. All the decisions are legitimized and agreed upon with the steering committee, and we have high legitimacy of our actions. As I mentioned, this project is implemented in Imereti region. We have two land parcels, one in Saltubo and the other one is Baghdati. Imereti region has been selected for outstanding climate conditions, which is very much favorable to the development of greenhouse in general. Since Soviet times, we have had horticulture developed very well. We have over 2,000 entrepreneurs engaged in the sector around the next slide, please. This is the image of the aerial image of the land parcels in dark green, Saltubu and Baghdati land plots. These are 220 hectares in total. Next slide. Now this image shows in detail what is the setup of our land parcels. I want to particularly indicate that just logistically, it's very well located. Saltubu land parcel is within 4 kilometers from Kutaisi International Airport, and we intend that Kutaisi International Airport will be one of the milestones and landmarks for our entrepreneurs for exports, and we are thinking of having a land parcel for cargo terminal for ES at the Kutaisi International Airport. Also, it's closer to the main road, to the highway, to the railroad, and Batumi and Potiport are in close vicinity. Location-wise, it is very well placed. Next slide, please. We've covered that, Batumi and Potiport. As I mentioned, the project envisages the state to develop the main infrastructure. And what is included in that? Now, power, energy, natural gas supplies. We have high consumption projected, according to the expertise the assessment, about 100 megawatt per hour, about 40 million cubic meters of natural gas to be consumed by potential tenants. Also, the infrastructure covers access roads and internal roads, 10, 7, and 5 meters in width of different use and intention. Also, the entire territory will be protected and fenced. It will have video monitoring, then surveillance systems and lighting. We'll have drainage and irrigation systems developed. We'll also have sewage system with a filtering and treatment facility. At the area, we'll have a training and demo center that and a logistics and sales center that I will cover later on. Now, what I want to say is that at this IAZ land, we'll have all the infrastructure developed that will be essential for businesses. Every land plot will have the relevant infrastructure connected to it that will be essential for its operation. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned at the previous slides, IAZ is intended to deliver all the essential services that are for the operation of businesses. This will be through one-stop shop principle, i.e. companies will be able to get all the services at one place and through one window. And these services, as intended, are, of course, the quality and operation and maintenance infrastructure that we'll be developing and that will be benefited and consumed by these companies. Export and import documentation, processing and clearance, local and international certification. You may well be aware that products outputs of these businesses will be intended for domestic and international markets, including the EU market and neighboring markets, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia, etc. And these businesses will need the certification of different levels and destinations. So we'll provide this service. What is also important is a service in high demand. We will be delivering consultants, either us or through our consultants, will be delivering consultations on financial and legal matters. Also, we'll have a service on centralized waste management, technology, and agriculture consultancy as well. Next slide, please. We intend that IAZ, as an independent legal entity of private law, should be financially independent, i.e. revenues that we will generate will make us self-sustainable. And there are several sources of such revenues. These are, first of all, the sales price or rental or lease fee of the land plots that we will be offering within this area. These 220 hectares of land has been divided into different technology zones, high, medium, and low technical zones. And we have derived 93 land plots. They will be leased out or sold out to the greenhouse investors or ancillary businesses that will be developing their businesses and enterprises at this area. Along with all the previous services that I mentioned, there will be various fees that will turn into revenues for years. And the service fees will be used mainly to consume the services of those that I have mentioned, like certification, technical, financial, legal, and also that we will be delivering without partners. Next slide, please. I want to now give floor to our experts, and first time Marius Parker is given floor now.
Thank you, Archel, for your introduction to this very interesting subject. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. As already mentioned by Archel, there are several common services delivered by IAZ. One of them is the logistics center. Of course, it is foreseen that the bigger companies will have their own packing and grading facilities, but for the smaller companies or even for farmers residing and having their companies around the IAZ, there will be constructed a logistics center with cooling facilities, packing, grading facilities, so that a more consolidated central place can be established for meeting suppliers and buyers, in order also to give these smaller farmers access to a larger market. The area total service ground is about 2 hectares, and the logistics center will consist of a set of different components. It can also be, it includes storage facilities for cooling, ultra low oxygen, so for long-term storage, and also packing and grading. Next slide, please. The purpose of the center will be to collect the produce, to provide quality assurance, consolidate and package, and provide the storage facilities, and also to give the possibility that transport companies can easily reach one central place and dispatch the product from there. It's also mentioned by Archel, for the international clients, there will be a one-stop window where all, let's say, custom facilities will be there, so that clearance can take place in one place, and after that the truck can travel to the country of destination with all the papers already done. Next, please. Next slide. One important factor is that nowadays a lot of buyers, especially the larger supermarkets, are insisting on a certain amount of food safety certification and also on production certifications. We are thinking here, for instance, on the international featured standards, the British Retail Council, Retail Consortium, Global GAP standing for Good Agricultural Practices, and of course compliance with HACCP hygiene rules during packing and processing of the produce. So the center also will give the possibility to be working within the guidelines and within the necessities of this modern certification system. As I said before, modern supermarkets, especially international supermarkets, of which several have representations in Georgia, insist nowadays on having this upstream and downstream certification. Next slide, please. It also will be a meeting place between retailers and producers. The advantage for the retailers will be that there will be more produce available on one place, so they don't have to travel from farm to farm in order to be able to collect a complete palette of different products. Next slide, please. Another important common factor, which was briefly introduced by Archel, was the training center. It is foreseen that there will be a training center established to be able to transmit to the farmers new technologies. During several of our field trips, we came to the conclusion that there is a big lack of knowledge of modern farming, modern varieties, new crops, but also how to apply crop protection materials. Even among dealers of crop protection materials and fertilizer dealers, we found a rather limited knowledge level. So this center will enable to transmit or to transfer this technology to new varieties and crops to farmers. However, it is not only the technical, let's say, agricultural aspects. Also, we would like to educate the farmers on group formation, associations, cooperatives, and economic. How do I apply for a credit? How do I apply for finance? So it will be also a meeting place between, let's say, financiers and farmers. Nowadays, sustainability of agriculture is, of course, of high importance. As I said before, there will be quite an emphasis on environmental friendly production techniques and produce. The center itself, or the training center itself, is supposed to be self-sufficient in the sense of finance. It can be financed partly by donations of companies who wish to present their innovative technologies. Course fees, because it is quite known that if you get something for free, it is not appreciated or considered as not of high standard. So there will be course fees charged for the different training classes. Of course, there will be, because it is a practical training center, there will be production of produce and agricultural products. So there will be some income from that. And we do hope that, especially in the beginning, there will be some grant provisions. Our calculations and experience with similar setup in other countries indicate that within 2.5 to 3 years, it should be possible to make the center self-sufficient from a financial point of view. And as I said, the training center is there for farmers, input providers like seed companies, fertilizer companies, pesticide companies, training providers, development agencies, and also for banks and NGOs supplying credit schemes for small farmers. Next slide, please. Well, there was a possibility for companies to participate in the HCDC, the training center. We have had several interested companies that would like to demonstrate their fruit trees, fruit shrubs, different glass houses and glasshouse technologies. So there is the option here for input suppliers to participate and donate part of the produce or the products or the trees or seeds that they would like to have demonstrated. So if there's any company interested to demonstrate in a practical way and comparing with other, let's say, suppliers, please feel free to get involved into the horticulture training and demo center. Next slide, please. There also, as was mentioned briefly by Archil, the whole zone will be supplied with gas, electricity, and water and sewage services. The water being both drinking water as well as irrigation water. In total, the zone will be supplied with a capacity of 100 megawatt per hour. This is mainly because of the high technology greenhouses. I'll touch on that subject a little bit later. They will consume a lot of electricity because nowadays production is done in wintertime with a lot of artificial light, which consumes a lot. Now, this electricity can either be taken from the net or it can be generated by the companies themselves with just gas generators or with biogas production and using this biogas as well for electricity production. The whole zone will be supplied with fiberglass data cables so that companies can communicate with the outside world in the most efficient and fastest way as possible. The water and sewage services, there will be drinking water supplied as well as irrigation water, but it is also possible that companies will drill their own well for irrigation purposes. The high technology greenhouses will have a recirculation system on which 60 to 70% of the irrigation water can be recirculated. And our indications are also that the rainfall in the area will be able to supply 80% of the requirement of the crops in the greenhouses. Next slide, please. Finally, I come to the proposed layout in the two different zones. As indicated by Archil, there will be 2 zones and 2 different municipalities. You see an overview of the cultivable plots. We have the high-tech greenhouses, which are the very modern greenhouses working with artificial light, substrate growing, completely computerized irrigation system, etc. Those are the orange one. In the left top corner, you will see the organic area, especially for the export markets. We see the possibility for a large production of organic produce out of Georgia into the European Union and into the region, and maybe also to a limited amount in the local market. If you see that Scandinavia and, for instance, Austria and Germany are increasing the total amount of organic produce by 10% every year, you will see that it is a great opportunity. We also have projected here a mix of medium tech and low tech greenhouses, as well as the possibility for growing in tunnels or a half in the open, for instance, red fruit, blueberries, etc., etc. Next slide, please. Also the same we see here in the Baghdadi plot. It is foreseen here, however, that there will be a little bit larger amount of the high-tech companies, mainly because the plots are larger here, and therefore it is more profitable to put large-scale operation here. This zone does not include the organic part, because for organic growing you have to adhere to certain isolation boundaries with other plots with farmers that are not organic, and that was more difficult to organize in this zone. So the Baghdadi zone will consist only of conventional growing, having high-tech, medium-tech, and low-tech facilities. And with this, I would like to hand back the presentation to Archil for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marius. On the next slide, I want to give floor to Georgi Dadiani to carry on from this slide onwards. Georgi, floor is yours.
Thank you, Archil. Thank you, everybody, who is attending the meeting. My slide, assigned to me is the renewable energy generation possibilities, and is driven from the preliminary assumptions Marius was touching. It's about the requirement and the need for 100 megawatt electricity to be distributed on both plots, production sites of IAZ, and 40 million cubic meter of natural gas also to be distributed between the private business enterprises in order to organize the heating system for them and get the hot water for it. So the renewable energy generation is one of the priorities that IAZ is considering in order to reduce as much as possible the taking away, the needed electricity of natural gas from the state grid or state main pipeline, and to allow the private entities to establish their own enterprises in the field of solar energy generation, for example, that could take a small part of the required energy needed. We are talking about the bioenergy generation possibilities, and IAZ is intensively supporting the project by introducing the opportunities to the forestry department of the Ministry of Agriculture to use the allocated waste for the renewable energy generation that somebody could introduce as a business opportunity to the IAZ greenhouse cluster. So the renewable energy generation, Marius has also mentioned, is also covered with the biogas generation possibilities, because IAZ is introducing its pilot project for the cattle farm. Is located just above the Tsaltubo land plot, 159 hectare land plot. And the cattle farm is considered for the cooperative use from the cattle owners, living at Kopitnari IDP settlement, from 700 cows up to 1,000, according to today's estimation. So the biogas energy generation can be part of that activity as well. That's about the renewable energy generation. All business enterprises are welcome to come up with their proposals and consider the possibility of establishing their own energy generation facilities at IAZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi. Now, next slides and following slides will be presented by Eberhard from Berlin. Eberhard, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Archel, and a very good afternoon to everybody. This is now the fourth industry briefing, and I have to say we are very impressed with the large number of participants over the 4 briefings we held. My name is Imereti Agro Zone. I am a financial expert, and I have been supporting the IAZ for about a year now. We came very early on, we came to realize that IAZ is a major undertaking, and it will require finance. It will, not just IAZ, which we speak about today, but also the farmers, the ancillary businesses, the training center, everybody working in the IAZ. And we estimate that that will be about 100 companies and 700 employees. I would like to speak about 2 aspects here today. Firstly, again, on the concept of IAZ as the developer of the Greenhouse Cluster Development Project to be a one-stop shop. And secondly, about the work that we have done in our pre-feasibility study in identifying opportunities for finance with banks operating in Georgia, other financial services providers, for example, for factoring or leasing solutions, and very importantly, the financial support that is available from development agencies and international financial institutions, where a very broad range of international financial institutions from around the world is supporting Georgia and fully supports the objectives of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Agriculture in further developing agriculture in Georgia. Now, let me start on slide 32 with some short background on IAZ's dedication to being a one-stop shop. You have heard the word cluster development over the presentation a few times, and obviously one of the services that the farmers, businesses, and also about 700 employees on the zone will require is access to financial services. This is including the full range of corporate and commercial banking products. As you have heard, there will be farmers producing vegetables, herbs, fruits, etc., for sale in local and international markets. So point of sale facilities for making payments to these farmers will be required. But also, for example, for the ancillary businesses, sourcing inputs for the IAZ from international markets, the execution of international payments. We have listed here some services that would typically be required, and IAZ is extending an open invitation to banks operating in Georgia to consider setting up branches on the IAZ to serve this client potential of about 800 to 900 clients. My colleague Marius Packer already mentioned that that the training aspect, not just for IAZ, but also for the broader Imereti diaspora, is a very important aspect of the cluster development. And we would also envisage banks operating in the IAZ to provide training to the farmers and businesses. As a former banker, I know that writing a loan application is a very structured process that can be taught and can be learned. And it helps very much for the loan approval process in the bank if the applicant knows how to write it. This also includes the preparation of business plans, marketing strategies, pricing strategies, and also from a commercial and financial perspective, we see great opportunity that the training center and its supporters provide benefit to the occupants of the cluster development. Next page, please. I would now like to speak about the work we have done on identifying sources of finance beyond what commercial banks and other financial services providers can provide in Georgia. Obviously, the Georgian government subsidizes, for example, special credit programs extended to the agricultural sector in Georgia. Also local banks provide loans to the agricultural sector. But as we and also other studies have found, these sources of finance can be quite limited. And as my colleagues explained, some of the projects on the IAZ can be very capital intensive. We, as the project advisors, during the feasibility studies, performed a number of business plan calculations. And you see the businesses that we looked at the bottom row of slide number 34. We did exemplary high-level business cases for all of the businesses operating from the IAZ, calculated their overall capital requirement. And we took these high-level business plans into discussions with the banks, international financial institutions, and development agencies. We are referring here to pilot projects. This is how we positioned them in our discussions, because they were just exemplary projects. And for example, for farmers, we calculated an optimal size, as my agricultural specialist advised, an optimal size of a 6-hectare high-tech greenhouse. And just to give you a number, that would require approximately 15 million euros of total finance from CapEx and working capital to support such an undertaking. In our discussions with banks, development agencies, and international financial institutions, and there were roughly 30 or so of them, we identified very strong support for the IAZ greenhouse cluster development, and also an in-principle readiness to extend loans, grants, or technical assistance. Obviously, as I said before, one needs to apply for this, and it helps to understand how to apply for this. So that's where I would see the training center, but also the explanations that we have provided in the final report on the IAZ development, which has been provided to you via the Treasury link. I would see that as starting points to consider how to apply for the various programs available. And obviously, both IAZ and the project advisors will be happy to support any approved respondent in accessing these sources of funds with the banks, international financial institutions, and development agencies we identified. Next slide, please. Let me explain in some more detail what we looked at when we did our high-level business cases, and I'm using here the high-level business case we developed for farming business. We looked at the cost of potential cost, I should like to say, because the land prices have not been determined yet, the potential cost of purchasing the land. Alternatively, it can be leased. The greenhouse setup that needs to be erected, equipment that needs to be purchased, other infrastructure that each individual farmer would need to set up. We also looked at working capital requirements, because we found that typical wholesalers and retailers demand payment terms from the suppliers of agricultural produce. So with some of the crops, there are fairly long periods between seeding the crops and producing sellable product. So in addition to the capital expenditure and short CapEx, there's also working capital, short-term working capital that would be required. Now, the good thing is property, equipment, and also receivables can be used as collateral when engaging with banks, international financial institutions, and applying for loans. Having determined how much it will cost to set business up, we looked at potential sources of funds. And as I said already, international financial institutions are very supportive of the overall project and ready, willing, and able to accept loan applications from individual applicants. We also looked at mezzanine capital. Mezzanine capital is if you so want, a special kind of loan that has some equity elements, equity rewards attached to it. And we found that there are financial investors, also from the international community, that are willing to top up those loans that can be secured from international financial institutions and banks with mezzanine capital. Now, in any business, and I'm saying this again as a banker, there should be an equity element injected into the business, and on global best practices, it would be suggested to bring along something between 15 and 20%, 25% of equity, that is shareholders' funds, that will need to be injected to support the business as a risk cushion and cover. All in all, we believe that the sources of funds should be sufficient to set up these businesses, and the business plans also support that the businesses are profitable and generate sufficient cash flow to repay the loans from IFIs and banks. If you would like to have further details on these particular aspects, as I said, please visit the final report and look for finance or financial aspects. You will find a great number of pages and annexes to explain the work that we have done, and it may prove very helpful to potential investors in the IAZ to determine how to conduct, how to finance their investments. With that, I would like to come to an end of my short presentation. Obviously, I will be happy to answer any questions in the Q&A session, and you can also reach out to us via the EOI website or on email. And any questions that are of interest to the broader range of participants will also be then posted on our FAQ website. So thank you very much for your interest. And with that, Archer, not trying to cut you out, but let me hand over to my colleague, Michael North, on the following slides. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Eberhard. My name is Michael North. I also want to welcome all the participants here today. And I have the privilege of exposing or describing a particular situation that we have also identified as part of the project. If you look at the structure of IAZ, you will see that it is a limited liability company, state-owned, and there is absolutely no reason why IAZ itself must be a state-owned company. However, before we start off with that, IAZ itself is in the process of setting itself up. It is developing the corporate governance rules that need to be followed. It is developing the production of financial statements to be part of a full management information system that then will be able to manage all the different, so to speak, departmental activities of IAZ. If you look of all the activities that IAZ intends to engage with, you will see that there is the infrastructure development, which is relating to the fact that the lands that have been attributed to IAZ in its ownership and its property are closed properties, closed areas, and can be secured and fenced, and are as such completely identifiable. So what we will see from the government point of view, they will have to develop the infrastructure that gets to those places, and then IAZ itself will need to develop the infrastructure inside the secured area in order to prepare the territories for the occupants or clients of IAZ that are wishing to set up their businesses. The businesses, as we have already been told by our colleagues, Marius Packer and Eberhard Brothage, are divided from a projection point of view into high-tech, middle-tech, and low-tech investment possibilities. And what we do understand from it is that the high-tech possibilities are very highly capital intensive. Middle tech would, logically be less capital intensive, but still capital intensive, and low tech would also require minimum type of capital investments. If you see then also what is IAZ supposed to make a living from, the proposal is to sell the individual properties or the individual plots that are being occupied by the different sort of clients of IAZ, the occupants, with their own different type of technologies that the clients choose. It's not IAZ choosing the technology and the produce that will be produced. It's the clients deciding what type of investments they want to make and what type of capital expenditures they will develop. However, understanding that the local market conditions are such, they will very likely also need a lot of co-investment opportunities, and that is what my colleague Eberhard Brodhager has been focusing on before, outlining the fact that the individual occupants and clients of IAZ will be able to draw on local banks and sort of programs and credit lines from the IFIs. One of the services that IAZ will, however, then be performing is to make sure that all the clients and occupants will be able to intercommunicate efficiently in these financing discussions. Why we are talking about land and lease, sale and lease, we propose an outright sale, and that's important also for international investors because they would like to own property, very often want to own land. We understand that there are some limitations in accordance with Georgian law for international investors to own land, but within the parameters of IAZ, we have established the possibility that foreigners will be able to also buy land. However, we also anticipate, because of the generally surrounding conditions, that the clients and occupants may prefer to lease the land at certain conditions. Also, you see IAZ as a service provider that by building the internal infrastructure, they will be also responsible to the management of the energy supply and distribution inside, the electricity, the gas, and what we have already been touching upon before in the other individual statements from my colleagues. Yeah? Next slide, please. So one of the things that IAZ could do is to entertain discussions with interested parties to make a general O&M contract for a private company to take over the management of IAZ altogether. Still, IAZ being a state-owned company, however, on the basis of an O&M contract, could engage some large or larger asset management company to take over all these service duties, of course, at the same time allowing and licensing the services to the O&M management company so that they will be able to recover their service cost from the clients. In the context of all these activities of IAZ, we understand that all clients will need to have equity investment sources, and we are offering, or IAZ is offering, to their clients and occupants the possibilities to enter also into PPP structures in accordance with the Georgian PPP requirements, and supporting those individual clients to set up their operations, especially when it comes to capital-intensive situations. Yeah. So one other element would be that when selling land, IAZ would, however, still retain certain rights, for example, preemptive repurchase rights, provided that certain predefined policy outcomes are not observed by the private sector participants and occupants and clients. Next slide, please. So as we are seeing the process going through a two-stage process, we have now invited interested parties to provide their input to the process through the unbinding expression of interest, whereby we would invite private clients and occupants and all interested parties. That includes also ancillary businesses, parties, banks, certification companies, etc., to make IAZ understand the requirements, the technical requirements, the full other legal requirements of contracting with IAZ on the basis of this offered opportunity. Another part will be in this two-stage process, the development of the terms and conditions out of this information that we receive from the expression of interest process, the terms and conditions of the RFP process, request for proposals, meaning that in that sense, IAZ will start engaging itself in developing the plots and the infrastructure leading to the plots, and also provide relevant sources of finance internally to this development. However, as a result of the RFP process, we expect that certain parts of the lands will be distributed to clients and occupants that will then, develop their own individual companies locally with their different type of products that they want to produce there. One of the considerations that we have also developed is that IAZ, being now a state-owned company, could itself transform into a joint stock company in the end of the year, also as part of the RFP process, if it is understood that there is enough private interest in the private ownership of these operations. Understanding that IAZ is an asset management company, is a state-owned asset management company, but as I said before, with no reason why it should not be a private asset management company. Thank you. Next slide. I think now we can take a look at a foreign direct opportunity that has been offered to IAZ, which we are exposing here to show that while we are discussing with a lot of different financing structures that include the IFIs, the local banks, international banks, and also asset management companies in Europe, we have also a discussion with a London-based company that has been providing the offer to provide 100% equity financing to the project of IAZ, exactly, under the secured borders of IAZ. And however, expect certain conditions to be met. One of them would be that the O&M company that we have been referring to before as a partner to IAZ should be an international company, because local companies would not qualify for that particular condition, a BBB rated company by Moody's or Standard & Poor's. Or in the alternative, would enjoy a guarantee of one of the IFIs or highly rated financial institutions abroad. This could be the case when we would identify a very strong Georgian local partner that would be eligible for IFI financing directly. In any case, all these discussions are going on within the parameters of certain repurchase conditions from the finance providers. And next slide, please. Here you can see how this could be worked out, in the sense that there would be the single equity investor that would contract with IAZ and would take over the ownership and property of the entire land, plus all the infrastructure, plus all the property on the land, and become the 100% owner of that property. At the same time, they would need to receive a minimum guarantee, return guarantee, which you could also say preferred dividend or protected financial income, in return over a longer period of time. For example, in this particular example here, 7% in US dollars, yeah? Every year, and that would need to be guaranteed permanently and firmly. Details, of course, need to be negotiated in particular. One of the ways of how to secure this financial obligation is by granting the guarantor, and in this case we are anticipating a local, strong Georgian company qualifying for IFI support, granting the IFI a first mortgage on the land and property of IAZ. Thank you very much. I think I have, sort of been able to show you one possibility out of many possibilities, how to deal with IAZ also on a fully managed basis. Thank you very much, and I think I can pass over back to Archil to continue and finalize the presentation. And of course, I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have. I'm currently located in Frankfurt, but I'm very frequently and all the time, in fact, except for COVID conditions, in Georgia, in Tbilisi, and I'm, of course, ready to talk and discuss these issues anytime. Thank you very much. Archil, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Eberhard and Michael, both for this very interesting slides. As I mentioned, expression of interest is a non-legally binding part of our practice within our stages. And as a result, we won't have a winner or loser in phase one. Within the expression of interest, we will be evaluating and studying and scrutinizing the requirements of our potential investors. At the same time, we have identified criteria for assessing and evaluating and soliciting them for the RFP stage. Several criteria have been developed. These are, first of all, experience and background, experience in delivering the projects of this type. You may well be aware that experience matters in the activity, but investor may not have this particular experience, but may contract someone as a partner or get this from our partner organizations, because we will be rendering these services like legal, financial, technical, agriculture, etc. Also, next criteria is job creation, opportunities for employment. One of the criteria that we will be assessing proposals is by the degree of local employment for local residents, new jobs to be created. As I mentioned, that will be one of the criteria. Equally important is the investment volume that will be made within this project, and the timeline of investments. The more quicker, the better. The investors understand this well, but our goal is to launch operation of greenhouse as early as possible. And the last criteria is matching with all the goals and ideas that government policies have within its line, within its environmental protection and the agriculture line. And these are laid out in the strategy and different concept papers on environmental protection and agriculture. Next slide, please. And I guess that was all. Now we move. I mean, the presentation has been longer than expected, but let me now request all the participants to ask questions. Any topic, any aspects that you're interested, you may raise hands to ask a question virtually, and you can do it by going to the participants in the lower bar, and you'll be given floor by the moderator. You may write to us in the chat by April the 16th, 2 days are left, or we will be extending this further. You may ask questions, and EOI deadline for the EOI is April the 30th. So please be active as possible, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Archel. I think Archel already mentioned some of the rules that are written here, but I will still read it out before we'll start the Q&A, just in case. So first, you can refer with your question and or comment in the Zoom chat, and we will read the question out from the Zoom chat. You can also refer with your question and or comment by virtually raising your hand, which can be done by going into Participants tab, as I mentioned, and then raising your hand by clicking the Raise Hand button. Also, please turn on the camera if you would like to raise a question, and please virtually lower your hand in case you no longer have question. And also, please mute yourself after you have commented and or have raised the question. Thank you, and yeah, you can ask questions. Okay, I see that Nicholas Spassky is raising a hand. So please, Nicholas.
Yeah, hello, hello everyone. Thank you very much for this very clear presentation. So in 2 words, I'm the manager of Richel Group, which is a French company providing manufacturing, designing greenhouses with equipment. We have some projects in the region and in Georgia especially. We are quite interested by this project as a technological supplier. So I have 2 questions to address to you. The first question is regarding the choice of the investor regarding the equipment for low, mid, and high tech. As I understood, the investor is free to choose any supplier from the market, or shall he go through a process, IAZ bidding center. So this is the first question. The second question is regarding the technical specification that was partly listed in the IAZ documents. I mean, the choice of the greenhouse, of the equipment. Should the customer, the investor, stick to this technical specification, or we, as let's say, expert in this field, can we propose alternative solution? Because we asked this question because we understood perfectly that this zone is split in low, mid, and high tech. So how let's say the choice is made between high and mid high tech, on which criteria. So this is the second question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas, for the question. I think Mr. Archil will answer the question.
On the first question, I'll answer it. Thank you, Nicholas, for the question. Let me tell you that, of course, investor is free to choose the supplier. We will have in our database all the registered suppliers, and we will offer them those that have participated in the expression of interest. They will be captured in our database, and we will be offering them IEU to the investors. They will decide ultimately, and that's up to them to choose. That's about your first question. I hope I answered. Now, on the second question, I guess if Marius gives you an answer, that will be perfect on the technical parameters and requirements that we have in our documentation. Marius, floor is yours.
Thank you, Archil, and thank you, Nicholas, for your question. As Archil already said, what you actually acquire as an investor is a piece of land with a connection to gas, electricity, and water. And depending on the technology that you choose, you will get the capacity on that one. Yeah? So if you go for high tech and you need a lot of gas because you do cogeneration, you need a bigger pipe. If you're going to use your own well for irrigation water, you will get a smaller connection on drinking water. So actually what you get is a piece of land with the facilities and all the surrounding service opportunities. Regarding the technology is completely what the investor sees as the best balance. What does the technology produce? How many kilos per square meter? What is my investment per square meter? What is my financial possibility? In other words, nothing is fixed as such from within IAZ, as long as you comply with the general, let's say, Georgian rules and regulations on building constructions and environmental. Yeah? If you say, I want to dump my washing water from my irrigation system or from my reverse osmosis, I want to dump it into the ditch, that will not be allowed. You will have to dump it into the drainage so it can be taken to the, let's say, sewage treatment plant. Yeah, so you are free to build as long as you are in line with the general rules and regulations of building and construction of such buildings in Georgia. And once again, you just get a piece of land with the connections to the capacity required for the technology you choose. So there's no, even if you would say, for instance, I need a bigger area for my high-tech greenhouse, and I would like to have, because next door is projected to have, let's say, a low-tech greenhouse section for low-tech greenhouse. If you say I want, let's say, 6 hectares and I want 3 + 3 hectares, it's also possible. Yeah, it's quite flexible. There's no pressure at all from IAZ to follow certain rules and regulations. It's completely what the investor sees is possible, what is feasible, and what do I have in my pocket to invest. I hope it answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much for this precision. Thank you, Didima.
I think, thank you, Marius, for your answer, and thank you, Archil, also. I think Georgi also wants to add on a couple of words. Please, Georgi.
First of all, thank you, Nicholas, for your interest. We have discussed already the project, and I'm happy to respond just to add on to whatever Archil and Marius has said. Yes, we confirm that any investor, any private investor has the possibility to choose the supplier. But I just want to stress on the horticultural training demo center possibilities for the agri-input providers and for the technology suppliers. What we're offering is to think of setting up and demonstrating their own facilities, their own products at horticultural training demo center, so the supplier, the agri-input supplier, can offer to the interested parties already existent more than 2,000 greenhouses around IAZ greenhouse production site, cluster production site, and also to those who would come and want to establish their production facilities at Imereti Agro Zone. So HTDC is just an instrument, a possibility to set up, your sales, to set up, and offer and explain and train people and explain why the advantages of your technologies are, what are the advantages of your technologies to others that would be also offered at HTDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi, for your answer. Yes, we'll still be waiting for your questions. Please feel free to ask any question on any topic. You're free to do so if you have any questions, of course.
Before there are no questions, can I just give a short comment, please, from Mr. Georgi Akhalkatsi from EBRD and Mr. Aftan Dutskitava from ADB. Two IFIs have been present, and the messages they've messaged to me are almost similar. So let me just give you an information that they were sorry they had to leave, and do another meetings, but they were really interested in the project. They would like to see the presentation uploaded together with the video introduction and the sector briefing that we had in order to set up the special meetings with IAZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi.
For any further questions, please don't hesitate to ask whatever you consider relevant.
Marius has raised the hand, so please, Marius.
Yeah, Michael, concerning the discussions you had with international banks, what I think you mentioned in your presentation, but what is the percentage of equity that they are looking for into the projects, let's say of a high-tech project?
Michael, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Marius, for the question. The particular discussions we have is with one single investor that is interested in 100% equity investment. He is not looking to leverage his investment with loans. However, obviously, if there are some good lending opportunities, especially coming also from the international community, then they will, of course, also be interested in evaluating, their kind of impact on the performance of IAZ and the company as a whole. Yeah? But for the starter, they would look for 100% equity injection. We, however, are also talking to quite a big other numbers of investors, and they typically would not be ready to look into any project financing if there's not at least 30 to 45, 50% equity. Yeah, so this gives us quite a challenge in Georgia, simply because equity sources in the country are limited and are dependent on some kind of international partnership and contributors. Most of the time, investors are looking on opportunities, how they can leverage it and how to be protected also by the international financing institutions, and even this individual investor that we are talking to would need the financial guarantee that the financial performance of the obligations out of the financing is guaranteed to a certain minimum. I hope this answers the question.
Thank you, Michael. I see that Eberhard and Georgi, maybe whoever wants to start.
Eberhard, please.
Thank you very much, Marius. A very important question. I speak from a corporate and commercial banker's perspective. As I said, the projects that have a fairly high degree of capital expenditure will also have land that can be valued, equipment that can be valued. They will have working capital requirements supported by receivables that can be valued. All of these elements can serve as collateral for loans. However, I agree with Michael, a certain portion of equity will be required, and that depends on the underlying nature of the business. For example, and please correct me, Marius, if you grow blueberries, from seeding them to producing very substantial yields, you may have to cover a period of 18 months, whereas for tomatoes, you can measure it in weeks, if not in days, before produce can be sold. It very much depends on the individual business, how much capital is required in the first place, and also on the repayment profile of the loans. Banks typically speak of a so-called gearing ratio. They put the equity that an investor brings along in perspective to the overall financing that is required. A gearing ratio of 1/3 would, for example, suggest that there's 25% of equity and 75% of lending. From my perspective, such a ratio could be achievable, and then obviously it depends. A high-tech greenhouse probably will cost around 15 million euros, but a smaller plot with a lower technology may only cost 3 million euros. So in terms of the absolute numbers of capital that need to be sourced from either equity providers or loan providers varies greatly across the approximately 100 plots that are being offered in the greenhouse cluster development. As I said, our discussions with banks have shown that there is in principle readiness to support these projects through loans. But obviously it depends on the individual loan application, and it depends on the prior track record. If you as a investor in IAZ have already operated a farm profitably for a number of years, a bank will obviously find it easier to review your past performance and make some predictions about the future, how you would be able to perform. So it's difficult to make a general statement. It depends on the merits of the individual case. And as I said in my short presentation, we'll be happy to introduce you to those partners of ours that have expressed an in principle readiness. I hope that this helped. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eberhard. Georgi, I think you wanted to.
Thank you, Eberhard. You have covered, the main explanatory notes from myself as well when it's related to equity and loan proposals to the capital incentive concrete business project like greenhouse construction projects, high-tech greenhouse construction projects, for example. And they are mainly related to our initial discussions with IFIs while identifying their conditions. But just to stress out what Michael was referring to while was telling about 100% equity financing possibility, it's more capital incentive project, in fact, more related to IAZ development itself. And that's the equity proposal that we've got in case we will obtain the O&M, highly rated O&M operator that could guarantee the investment to the investor. Thank you.
Thanks for the clarification, because my question is related to investors into the horticulture project, not, let's say, the development cost of the IAZ as such. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Georgi, and thank you to everyone who contributed. Please, if anyone has questions, still you can ask. We will be waiting. Thank you.
Yeah, I still got one question. I think we discussed that at length, but maybe Archel can indicate what is the time frame until the first plots become available for occupation. Let's say when the first plots have been leveled, the roads are there, gas connection is there, and electricity connection. And what time frame should we think, Archel?
Thank you, Marius, for the question. Infrastructure development is the state obligation, as I mentioned. And this contest or selection of the potential investors in the second phase will be for the development of the infrastructure to coincide in time with the investment to be made by those entrepreneurs. All this infrastructure will be brought to the land plots that will be within the interest of certain investors and will be required. The development of infrastructure will match the requirements of potential investors, i.e., it will vary from one land plot to another, depending on the needs and demands of investors and timeline for the operation.
Thank
So
you.
let's say that if Nicholas has a client to build a greenhouse mid next year, there will be gas connection and electricity connection. So I'm talking summer 22.
Yes, I once again confirm that any investor will have the infrastructure by any time required. And I'll tell you how is that possible. Well, of course, depending on the volumes and capacity that we have, that requires time, but within our territory, there is a infrastructure. SOCAR delivers natural gas to the region, and Energy Pro delivers power energy to subscribers in the region. And there are investors that will decide to get parts in our initiative, and they will get natural gas, power energy, or any other utility service by the time they need.
Thank you, Archel. If Georgi wants to, I think Georgi wants to comment. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, please, just to add on as a comment to Archel's perfect explanation, on both land plot sites, the natural gas and the electricity are already available, ready to be distributed to the potential private beneficiaries. While we're talking about bringing additional energy, we're talking about the time frame for 100 megawatts in all, you know. So it's the time frame for 3-year period. But if somebody wants to start the project, even now, the electricity, natural gas, and water are available, access roads are available, and IAZ is taking as an obligation to level the land and prepare the land plot, to the potential investor upon the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi. Michael North is raising the question. Please, Michael.
Yes, thank you very much. I also just want to add on, we have to distinguish two things. One is IAZ itself as an investment object, and the other one is the investment objects being the clients and occupants of IAZ. And also the question of technically setting up individual clients on their plots, as Marius has asked now, in the sense of when can they put up a greenhouse, and will all the connections be available? As long as IAZ itself is the state-owned company and is in the process of committing itself to develop the infrastructure, irrespective of any type of international or large, sort of overlay financing, negotiated with a big O&M company abroad. Yeah? So it would be on the basis of individual, financing conditions. So if the client himself would come up and wanted to buy a 10-hectare plot out of the 93 plots offered, I think we have planned 6 high-tech opportunities, 9 middle-tech opportunities, and all the rest up to 93 plots are for low-tech or organic or other type of agricultural solutions. So if, for example, your client, Nicholas, wanted to set up his greenhouse, he could go straight into the negotiation with IAZ to determine exactly the timings, the plot itself, where it is, how big it is, and how it will be financed. That is what will be then subject of the RFP process, where the individual plots will be more and better defined, and also the prices better defined, so that the security of calculation will also come into the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your insightful comment. Does anybody else want to ask a question or maybe make a comment?
Well, dear friends, if you want to clear anything, if you clarify things, this is the time. As I mentioned, this is a sector briefing, and after these 4 meetings, then this is the 4th, you will be able to write to us. Please feel free to use this very vital time to ask questions live. Well, I guess there are no questions left. Information has been very resourceful, and I guess we'll call it a day. I want to thank all of you for being part of this meeting. First of all, I want to thank the potential investors and respondents. Thank you for your interest. I want to thank enormously our team members, our experts, who have been helping and supporting us with their expertise and to cause this high interest and to give these very resourceful answers. I want to thank you all. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Didi Madlova.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.